Hello, and welcome to Share Your Secrets, a podcast that celebrates the diversity of food, art, and community. We're Bounceback Food CIC, a community cookery school that has been fighting food poverty in Greater Manchester, Cheshire, and North Wales since 2014. Earlier this year, we started working on our second fundraising recipe book, Secret Dishes from Around the World Too. It has exciting recipes from 20 countries and 20 original pieces of art by 20 local artists. In each episode, you'll find out about 2 of the 20 countries that will feature in the book. We'll talk food, art, and community with the artists involved, get insights from guests in the featured countries, and keep you up to date with what the Bounceback team have been up to. I'm your host, Miriam Rendell. I hope you enjoy listening. So, this week on Share Your Secrets, I'll be talking to Christian Turner, a Cheshire-based artist. He was assigned the Poland section of Secret Dishes from Around the World Too. I'll also be talking to Hera Hussain, the founder of Chayn, who grew up in Pakistan. But before we hear from them, I caught up with Duncan to find out what Bounceback have been up to this half-term.
So over the last few years, we've often gone into schools during half terms and the holiday time and cooked hot, nutritious meals for kids that usually get a free school meal. This half term, with COVID, we're doing things a little bit differently. We've run one of our online cookalongs specifically for young people in Greater Manchester. And it was a wonderful way to provide an activity to teach some young people some fantastic healthy recipes and bring people together over half term.
And I believe you've now got a copy of Secret Dishes from Around the World Too in your hand.
Yes, very exciting. So the test copies have arrived and they just look stunning. So the food photography, the art from all the different artists who contributed, the feel of the book, it's beautiful hardback first edition book. It's just amazing to see the whole thing come together. So much work has gone into this with all of the artists, our team, and Josh doing the food photography. It's a beautiful, beautiful cookbook, and just delighted with how they look.
Oh, I can't wait to get my hands on a copy. Now, normally you'd be preparing for a launch. For book 1, you were at the Royal Exchange, you had a big event to launch the first cookery book. Obviously, things are a bit different this year with COVID-19. So what have you chosen to do for the launch of book 2?
Yeah, things are a lot different to what we expected. So we hoped to get all the artists back together, so everyone from Greater Manchester, Cheshire and North Wales, in the way that we did earlier in the year to set the brief and to introduce everyone. But clearly we've had to adapt our plans, so we've decided to run a book launch cookalong instead on the evening of Friday the 6th of November. So that evening we've invited all of the artists who participated on the book. We also made some tickets available via Eventbrite as well. And the plan is to do a couple of things on Instagram Live, possibly YouTube as well. So that evening, if you're free, do check out our social media. Hopefully you'll be able to watch some of the session or take part in some way and see copies of the books as we launch Secret Dishes from Around the World Too.
Amazing! Your first experience of Instagram Live. I hope as many people listening can join as possible.
Yeah, it should be great, and just nice to reunite everyone that's worked on the book since we started this project back in January.
Thanks, Duncan. We'll have a final update next week. Christian Turner is a Cheshire-based artist who primarily works with oil paints. I started by talking to him about his early interest in art.
My interest in art's been a lifelong thing, where I think it's one of these things where if you ask a different group of children at different ages, who here is into drawing, who likes art, who is an artist, and I think you'll find that in a sort of a nursery or preschool group, most of them will put their hands up, yeah, I like drawing, I'm dead good at drawing. And as you move on year, the number of people who put their hand up kind of starts to diminish. I suppose that most people do have that kind of creative output or this want to create something artistic in some way or another. It's just, I think, with a lot of people, it starts to diminish as they get older, which is a real shame. But it's something I stuck at all the way through education, and you keep at it, and you do eventually get what you want and where you want to go. It's something I've always been interested in. Family-wise, I come from quite a scientific background. Dad's a chemical engineer and Mum has a degree in biochemistry, so it's quite a scientific background. So there felt like there was some pressure on me to pursue a scientific vocation, but I found that particularly as I got into A-levels, my interest in it did wane quite a bit. But I think if you look at some aspects of my work, I've tried to incorporate mathematical ideas into some pictures that I've done.
Yeah, you said that you're interested in geometry and bringing that mathematical side into artwork. How does that work?
Well, what I've done for the most part is taken influence from Arabic patterns that you'd find on walls, on floors, and thought, how does that translate, or what does that look like to me? So I was thinking primarily of a turtle. I think I noticed on the turtle's shell there was this kind of distinct pattern that appeared across all turtles, where a leopard's spots or a zebra's stripes would vary from animal to animal and be totally unique. There was this defined pattern on a turtle's back, and I thought, well, what if I could do something else with that? What if there's some kind of consistency there? What if I was to try something a bit more mathematically precise? I wasn't worried about how it would turn out. It was just figuratively throwing art at the wall and seeing what sticks. I tried one pattern for the shell. It looked quite nice. Try one for its fins and its face, something for the background. And it took an awful long time. I think in terms of the painting itself, it took about at least twice as long as an ordinary painting, and an awful lot more planning beforehand, trying different patterns, giving them a little tweak just to see what would happen. Again, it was just seeing how it would turn out. And I've done a couple of them. I think I've done 3 geometric style paintings before now. I feel like there's kind of a mixed reaction to them. I think some people, perhaps the Marmite of paintings.
You mentioned that marine life and bird life are a couple of your favourite subjects to paint.
Marine life in particular, I don't mind saying, it's something that I've always been interested in, where a lot of children had SpongeBob, Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel. I did have those, but I know that there was a lot of time committed to adult television in the evening as well, Attenborough documentaries.
Yeah.
So I saw a fair lot of natural world stuff, and particularly I think The Blue Planet came out when I was about 6 or 7, and that just that hit hard, and it was amazingly interesting. And since then I'm actually a member of the British Sub-Aqua Club, so I'd have gone scuba diving a few times.
Wow.
I think the last big dive we went up to Oban. We did a dive on a shipwreck there, the Breeder. That interest in underwater, or the marine life and what goes on in the ocean, I think fueled that desire to go scuba diving, as well as replicating what I'd seen and what I want to see on canvas.
Absolutely. And Blue Planet is such a fantastic series, isn't it? It's like this whole other alien world. Is there anything in particular that you've enjoyed painting from watching documentaries like Attenborough?
My absolute favourite projects, and I think the ones, and that's probably reflected in the reception that they've received, was the bait balls, where they'd have these large schools of fish discovered by different species of other animal like whale and dolphin and gannet, and they think, well, I'll follow the dolphin, I'll follow the whale, and they all converge on this giant ball of fish and proceed to go absolutely bananas. I think those are the projects I've had the most fun with.
What kind of things did you see when you were diving on the shipwreck in Oban?
Well, it was a big dive because it was in the ocean, it was on a large ship, it was a popular dive site. In terms of life, there's an awful lot of stuff that grows on the ship. We saw several anemones. Visibility was quite good. Sometimes, you can't see your hand in front of your face, but we could see a bit further. We saw some fish, and it's that classic fishing analogy. I saw a fish, it must have been this big. I couldn't tell you entirely what they were. I doubt they were salmon, but they must have been a yard long. A lot of the dives we have done, they have favoured shipwrecks, or it's been a training exercise, so it's ended up being in a quarry where fish are less abundant. But first dive I ever did was up at Capernwray. They did have fish there, and it was, I think they were like char, and it was this enter a new world moment because, first thing I did when I entered the water was these fish went straight across my face, and they were close enough that you could, so I did, reach out and touch them. It's not a cheap hobby, but I'd wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone who wants to give it a go.
Now, as part of the podcast, we're going to reveal which country you were assigned to paint.
Well, I've been working on the country Poland and the title page for that list of recipes in the book.
So when you got your envelope and you read Poland, what was your first thought?
Well, I was actually pleasantly surprised. I wasn't expecting Poland. So I think my first instinct was to actually start a conversation with the first Polish person I bumped into to see if they would be able to share some time with me about their country.
Did you manage to have a chat with someone?
It was quite providential almost. I was at work, walk in, and there was a couple of gents doing some work in our office, and I found out one of them was from Poland, so I thought I'll see if he's free for a couple of words over 5 minutes.
So when you're about to start your artwork, you've just mentioned by speaking to someone who's Polish, what other kind of research do you do? Because having seen your artwork, it is filled with Polish references. First of all, we've got the Wawel Castle in Warsaw. What made you choose that?
Well, I was actually speaking to this chap named Marcin. It was actually the first thing he mentioned was, well, we have this wonderful castle in Krakow. And I thought, right, if it's the first thing you've mentioned, then it's the first thing in your mind that you associate with your homeland. I think the important thing I was trying to do was if someone from Poland would see this painting and identify with it or relate to it and say, hey, they're talking about my home there, and perhaps perceive it in a positive way. I think I'm trying to tip my hat to Poland in a few ways there.
And that is so clear in the artwork because we've also got Chopin.
Yeah, Friedrich Chopin, Polish composer who actually spent a lot of his time living in France, but he is definitely Polish. I think he was from Warsaw.
Tell me about some of the food I can see in your artwork. Is it pierogi? They're dumplings?
There are lots of different flavours of pierogi I've found. You can have it savoury or sweet, and love to try either. And it's not something I've bumped into very often, but there is a good deal of pierogi there. And I think perhaps just keeping it all parcelled up like that allows you to imagine what kind of pierogi it is. It could be mushrooms, it could be strawberries, it could be little bits of mincemeat. That's accompanied by some borscht,
right,
which was a beetroot soup. But again, sounds very appetising.
And you featured a plane in the artwork. Is that a Hurricane or a Spitfire?
It's quite difficult to make the distinction being the size that it is, but I've tried to go for a Hawker Hurricane.
And is that from Squadron 303?
That's 303 Squadron, yes. I think I mentioned that in a comment on my Facebook page. And 303 Squadron was a Polish flying corps, or was a Polish unit in the RAF. Perhaps it's my way of tipping my hat to Poland's history, because what Poland is now has almost been completely defined by what happened in the Second World War. If you know some aspects about Polish history, and in particular in the Second World War, it's very little of it is good news. So I was trying to do something that acknowledges their efforts and their hardship.
And you're making reference to the Battle of Britain, particularly when Polish fighter planes were fighting on behalf of the United Kingdom.
Yes, there were quite a lot of Polish pilots in the RAF, and I say a lot of them did contribute towards the Battle of Britain. Like I say, it's not really a happy history at all for them. It's difficult to try and put something to paper and make it something that you can say, that is good, and we're proud of it. And I think the RAF and the big steps and the big movements they took in the Battle of Britain were, well, I think perhaps as a British national, one of the things that I can say I can tilt my hat to about them.
Absolutely. So these ideas that you've joined together in your artwork, how about the actual making of it? You use oil paints, is that right?
Mostly working in oil. I didn't use oil for the first time until after I'd finished doing my A-levels at school. Had a bit of trial and error. And one time I tried clearing my palette using water and ended up just painting my hand blue. But yeah, after working out the kinks, I found that working oil was something that I enjoy more than most other media. I've been back to watercolours before now, and I don't know whether it's because I was used to working in oils. It just felt difficult. It felt unintuitive. I feel like I can do more as a painter if I stick to oils.
So with this particular oil painting, was it your first attempt? Did you build it up? How do you go about making a piece like this?
Well, naturally, you always defer to your sketchbook when working on anything preliminary. One of the things I found when I left school was I just threw my hands up in the air and said, thank goodness I don't have to use a sketchbook anymore. And then about a year later, I went back to the sketchbook and thought, this is actually so much better. I can actually plan something out. Things are less likely to go wrong on the canvas. So the sketchbook is the place where, all your ideas are there, but only a fraction of them are any good. The final pieces are the ones that you think, well, that's something I thought could be developed further.
And the intricacies of that building, I mean, how long did that take you?
Not that long, actually. It's quite easy to find reference images online. But then you sort of take reference point as to where things should go on the canvas, scale up, measure lines, proportion. I'd say the hardest part is mapping it onto the canvas. Once it's all there, it's not too difficult to fill in the blanks and create depth and shading. Once you've got the framework down, it almost paints itself.
Says an artist. It's absolutely stunning, it really is. And the sky as well, it's a beautiful red colour. Why was that your choice?
The sky, I think there's a dual meaning in this one. If you look, it's sort of white on top, white overcast, cloudy, and then red underneath, which matches the colours of the Polish flag.
Clever.
And second of all, again, I think it's another World War II reference, perhaps a more subtle one, because Poland was invaded by Germany in 1939. Germany pushed through to Russia, and then not too long after that, Russia pushed Germany back and counter-invaded Poland. So Poland was invaded at least twice in about 5 years. They had conflict going across the whole nation. I believe by the time the war was over, their capital had almost completely been demolished. And I think the Soviets were an occupying force for about half a century afterwards. So because there's a red haze, it's this kind of a suggestion that perhaps at one time the land was on fire.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about your process and the direction you decided to take with the artwork. How did you hear about Bounceback?
I was working at a studio at the time, at the art room in Sandbach, and what with the art room and Bounceback Food having mutual charitable aid, I think Duncan got in touch with them about doing a cookery course in Sandbach. Now, I knew about it from people in the art room, but I wasn't on that course at the time. What did happen not too long after that, though, my partner won a competition online in order to attend a Bounceback Food course that was happening in Knutsford. It was there that I met Duncan properly for the first time, and it was there that we made recipes based on national dishes. I very much enjoyed the experience because I got to eat something at the end of it.
And you said one of the cookery courses that you've done with Bounceback, the country was Poland.
Yeah, like it was a happy coincidence that did a Polish dish on that one. And I think the dish that I did, the fish stew, I think Duncan said that one's featuring in the book.
Tell me a little bit more about that course.
The thing that stuck with me most with that was the fish stew, because I had the satisfaction of skinning the bass myself.
No way. Is that something you've done before?
No, that was the first time I'd successfully skinned a fish. I'm open to trying new things, particularly with food. Lifelong food lover.
Do you enjoy cooking?
Since moving out, I have found that there's a lot of joy to be had in cooking, and that's been amplified even more by lockdown, is having that extra time to put a bit of joy and love into a meal. I think it makes it more satisfying as well.
So what's next for you?
What is next? I have applied to go to university to study a bit of fine art because that's something I missed. Meanwhile, I am working on a side note with DSH Cables, who I believe were one of the corporate sponsors for the production of the book. So I know that my employer is supportive of my creative endeavours.
Who would you advise to buy the book?
As someone who enjoys cooking, it might be something to help diversify their food menu. Anyone who's willing to try something new. Anyone who's a good book collector, it'll look great on your bookshelf.
Oh, well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Christian. It's been a real pleasure to hear about your process and find out a little bit more about what you enjoy painting.
Oh, very welcome. Glad to talk.
If you want to see more of Christian's artwork, you can go to his webpage at www.christianturnerart.com, or you can find him on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Christian Turner Art. Earlier this year at Bounceback Food, we ran our annual social enterprise internship. The programme ran remotely, which enabled 20 young people from across the UK to join our team. Everyone was assigned one of the 20 countries that features in the book. Here's Caitlin with some fun facts about Poland.
Poland's national dish is pierogi, which are Polish dumplings. They can be served savoury or sweet using fillings such as meat, sauerkraut, cottage cheese, and fruit. A mermaid with sword and shield is Warsaw's emblem. Legend has it that this mermaid once led a lost prince to the site of Warsaw and ordered him to found the capital city. A bronze sculpture of the mermaid now stands in the Old Town marketplace.
Now let's hear from Phoebe to find out more about Pakistan.
Did you know that during Ramadan, most Muslims actually gain weight despite fasting from sunrise to sunset? This is because of the incredible food on offer for the meal where they break their fast. This includes dates, soups, juices, fresh vegetables, and sweets. Did you know that Pakistan have experienced a 250% increase in literacy rates over the last 5 years? This growth is the largest of any country to date.
Thanks to our interns for sharing those facts. Holly Gaughan is a self-taught illustrator who works mainly in acrylic, watercolour and digital illustration. She draws inspiration from botanical sketches and religious iconography, though often she incorporates her love of food and cooking into her work. For more information about Holly's work, check out the episode notes on Bounceback Food's blog. Hera Hussain is the founder of Chayn, a non-profit organisation with a global volunteer network which addresses gender-based violence by creating intersectional survivor-led resources on the web. Hera grew up in Pakistan, and when she moved to Manchester, she shared the same office space as Bounceback Food.
Yes, I moved to Manchester, I think 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. It's hard to tell. It feels longer. But so, yes, when I moved, Federation was just starting. So I was one of the first residents to do that. But Chayn started 7 years ago. So it really didn't start from the Federation. But a lot of exciting things have happened in those last 3 years.
Now, tell me, whereabouts did you grow up?
I grew up in Lahore, Pakistan.
Oh, fantastic. And how many years of your life were you there?
So I was born in Glasgow in Scotland, and then my parents moved back to Pakistan. In the middle, we went to Saudi Arabia for a few years, and then we moved to, because my father's a doctor and he got a job there, and then we moved back to Pakistan. So I think I was there from the ages of 5 or 6 until 18 when I came to the UK, back to Glasgow for university.
What would you say your lasting memory of growing up in Pakistan was?
Family. Just being around lots of warm, loving people. And yeah, there's just such rich culture and heritage in Pakistan that when I close my eyes I think about my cousins coming over for summer holidays, everybody playing, going to different houses of different elders, getting love from everyone. And yeah, it's all around that, or having really early morning breakfasts after nights out, or ordering, food, or going to street food markets, those kind of things. It's very, very fond.
Oh, your description is really bringing it to life in my mind. Tell me a little bit more about the food in Pakistan, the kind of food that brings people together.
Pakistan is a country, it's so varied. People often think it's a homogenous sort of country, and it's not. It was created in 1947. It has more than 100 languages are spoken. There are multiple cultures and ethnicities, just different ethnic groups. So that means we have a very amazing melting pot of cuisines. So in the west of Pakistan, you'll find, Baloch or Pashtun cuisine, which is, influences coming from Persia and Afghanistan. In the east of Pakistan, you have, Punjabi cuisine. In Sindh, you have Sindhi cuisine. And then a mix of people who migrated from India also brought over, at the time of partition, their food. So it's a lot of things. I think the things, if I had to say what's like one or two things that would probably be enjoyed across all parts of Pakistan, I would say tea. Like tea is a big thing. Again, different parts of Pakistan enjoy tea different ways, but having the accompaniments with tea. So if it's raining, everyone gets, especially in the hotter parts of the country, we all drink tea because the temperature cools down. And it's such an exciting thing. The rain is just so romantic and just, it represents all good things. So people have pakoras together, samosa, and jalebi, which is sweet. And in other parts of the country, if you go north where it is usually cold, they'll have warm tea with or without milk, and then they'll have lots of nuts with it or like cake. So it's just, I think that's probably something that we all enjoy. And then there's lots of different kinds of like, flatbreads, different kinds of breads, I think kind of sticks into my head. You have parathas, you have different kinds of rotis, you have stuffed parathas and naans and puris, which are deep fried, like rotis. Yeah, lots of things.
What would you say is the national dish of Pakistan if you had to choose one?
Oh, it's so contentious. It's very contentious. There's a fight raging on in Pakistan about this all the time in pop culture. Yeah, it's biryani versus palau. So biryani is, it's food that everyone enjoys, spicy, like, rice layered with different kinds of meats and vegetables, depending on which kind of, and, there are different recipes for it. And palau is less spicy, more mild flavored, but, it's cooked within like vegetable or like meat broth.
Yeah.
And topped with caramelized onions or just onions and butter. Yeah. So I would say either of those two would be like my picks for like the national dish because, there's a biryani camp and then there's a palau camp. I'm in both camps.
A safe place to be. What about your favorite recipe that you enjoy making? Something that you make that makes you feel like you're at home in Pakistan?
I make chicken karahi a lot, which is my quick thing. I follow the recipe of my aunt. It's so simple and it's so quick to make. It's done within like 25 minutes. So on an average week, I think I probably make karahi the most because, if you've got things going on and you just want something quick. Or the other thing that I really enjoy, which takes me back to Pakistan and I don't make it enough, is Kashmiri Chai, which is pink tea. It's drunk in the north of Pakistan, as the name says, in Kashmir. So you brew the leaves for hours and it's very sweet. It's also called pink tea because it looks baby pink because that's the color that comes out. And you top it up with nuts. And it's so amazing to have it in winter. So I usually make it a lot in winter. But it's something so decadent that, it's not something you make every day. Unless you're Kashmiri and that's something you or from the north of Pakistan and that's just something you drink every day. Yeah, so that reminds me as something that I'm, really, the smell of it, the look of it just really takes me back to Pakistan and cold nights in Pakistan, weddings and celebrations.
Tell me a little bit about a Pakistani wedding. What kind of things would be traditional?
Well, we have so many events. So a typical wedding would go over 5 to 7 days. There would be like, maybe 3 or 4 events, depending on what family, what, part of the country. And food waste is actually such a big problem in Pakistan that it's one of the areas where the government has done quite a lot of work. So we've gone through stages of one dish policies where you can only have one main dish. Because in a country where so many people go hungry, the amount of food waste that is generated by the wedding industry, it's crazy. Or sometimes, there were 2-dish policies and they're very strict about it. So the kind of food that is traditional is korma, which is very different to the way people in the UK think korma is. Korma, the way it's made here, is actually not accurate at all. I've not had proper korma unless I'm going to a Pakistani caterer. Even the restaurants here don't make it properly. Also, there are different kinds of kormas. It makes sense, people who's cooking it will bring their own flavor. But a traditional Pakistani wedding korma, it is very dark in color. It's not almondy color. It will have like nuts in it. So that's why it's kind of rich.
Yeah.
But if you looked at it, you would just think you're looking at a very diluted form of karahi. That's what it looks like. So it's spicy, but it's got like some nutty flavors in it. That is a traditional Pakistani food for wedding. And the other thing is gulab jamun, which is the sweet, like fried dough with syrup and pistachios and orange blossom and rose water and cardamom. And you get it here everywhere in the UK. So if you want to see what it tastes like, you can just go to any Pakistani shop or restaurant or Indian shop and restaurant and get it.
Have you found some local places in Manchester that do good Pakistani food?
Yes, that was the first thing when I moved to Manchester. I was like, I need to find proper desi spots. So the curry mile is great. You've got lots of choices there. I would say, however, as a Pakistani, I would say something controversial, which is there are lots of places that are not very good. So I had to test them. And a lot of my non-Pakistani friends like the places that I would never go and eat in.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I would say my Lahore is like my go-to.
Okay.
It's just so good. The only thing that I feel like they don't do that well is biryani and palau. So I have to give them a 0 for that. But everything else is great. And also love Dishoom. Dishoom does good North Indian food. Yeah, so Dishoom is great. When it opened in Manchester, I was so happy. I felt like my life, like quality of life had increased by at least 40%.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Oh, sorry, one more thing. On Curry Mile, there are lots of sweet shops. So there's Nirala, there's Zambala, there's Sanam. So there are a few of those. There's Sanam is also in Stratford. So these are the good places to get gulab jamun, pakora, samosas, biscuits, those kind of things.
Oh, these are top tips for the next time that I'm in Manchester. You mentioned about your auntie's curry. Are there any other traditional recipes that were passed down in your family?
Yeah, I wanted to discuss something with you because my grandmother, on my mother's side of the family, it's a huge family. So my grandmother had, there were 10 siblings. And so 9 sisters, 1 brother, and one of her sisters actually passed away 2 days ago. And I wanted to talk about one of the recipes that, you know, I remember as a child going to like her house and having, and that was palau. So that palau at her house was always so different because her husband, you know, doesn't eat a lot of spice. So in their house, they just didn't have enough spicy food. And I was used to eating spicy food, but I used to love their palau, which was such a simple dish. They only use, I think, 4 ingredients in it. So even simpler form of palau, just like, you know, meat broth. And then the dry masala that you usually use. So, you know, cardamom, cloves, fennel seeds, cumin, and, you know, you grind them up and onion, fried onion. And yeah, so it's just like, and made in butter. It was just so good, so simple, but just so good. So yeah, when I was talking to you, I was just thinking about her and thinking about like, you know, having that food as a child. We would go to her house every 2 weeks because, you know, we were very close to her.
Oh, what a beautiful tribute to mention her. Thank you for talking about her today. That's really special. I wanted to talk to you about community spirit, about holiday time, or about, like you mentioned, when your cousins came over in the summer. What is it that brings communities together in Pakistan?
Food, weddings, deaths,
Yeah.
national like celebration events, births, birthdays are a big deal. Yeah, loads of cultural celebrations. And people love food for sure. It is a food loving nation. And if you watch any food programs, bloggers on YouTube, you would have seen an episode about Pakistan. So you'll know that it is definitely a foodie country. One of the things that I had to get used to when I came to the UK was the fact that everyone orders for themselves when you go to a restaurant, right? Whereas in Pakistan, usually people order for the table. And then the food comes for the table, and then you take what you want for your plate. And so everyone gets to share everything.
Great. I love that kind of sharing aspect.
We also, interestingly, don't have starters and desserts. So that it all comes together. Desserts sometimes would come afterwards, but usually like you have everything on the table at the same. They just bring it in as it cooks, or they bring it all together.
Well, why not?
Exactly. So you get to decide which one you want to eat first.
I mean, I'm a big fan of pudding. I'd love that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about art in Pakistan. What would you describe as Pakistani art?
It's hard to pinpoint a particular type because, again, Pakistan is a very like diverse country. There's actually a very beautiful diagram that one of the fashion houses in Pakistan did about art of Pakistan, and it represents typical patterns and art styles from different provinces and different like areas. So you have like embroidery is big, block printing. First thing that comes to mind is fabric. So block printing and embroideries, colors, like very colorful. If we talk about other kinds of art, I would think of like geometric, like there's a whole architecture, paintings, all of that has geometric design, which is kind of a combination of like Indo-Persian influences because that's what the art in that region looks like. And recently, there's been an explosion of pop art of like marrying traditional things like, truck art, which is sort of unique to Pakistan, and marrying that with some of the like modern influences, like, imposing them on furniture. So it's very colorful, very vibrant.
I want to go back to where you were talking about the fabric, because Holly Gorn, our artist who designed for Pakistan, she took inspiration from adruk, block painted shawls or material traditional to the Sindh province in Pakistan. Are you aware of those?
Yes, ajrak. I grew up wearing ajrak prints. I really, really loved them. In fact, when I was designing the website for Chayn Pakistan, one of the patterns I used as inspiration for like empowerment and like sort of, making people feel at home was ajrak. So even on the website, we used that. It comes in different colors. Usually there's a lot of silver in it. So silver, blue, maroon. Sometimes there's purple and silver, but like blue and maroon is probably the most common. Black, blue, and maroon like combination for ajrak.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about Chayn. Firstly, what did you study in the UK?
I studied psychology and economics at the University of Glasgow, but I got involved into the world of like social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship in general and tech. And that's really what led me down the path 2 years after I graduated to start Chayn.
And what gave you the idea to set up Chayn? I believe there was a couple of friends that you were helping out.
Yes, I helped 2 friends very close to me get out of abusive marriages, one in Pakistan and one in the UK. But who was a migrant. And I realized that, as a young person who turns to the web for answers, for community support, inspiration, information, it just wasn't, the online landscape wasn't supportive to survivors of gender-based violence, neither in the UK, neither in Pakistan. And I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to, once my friends were settled and they were safe, I wanted to take all the information I had gathered in the process of helping them and put them online for everyone, because, the web is such a beautiful tool for us to, organize, to get help. And it was a shame that at that time it was either lacking of information or the information was very patriarchal.
Can you tell me about the name of Chayn? Where did that come from?
Yes, so Chayn is an Urdu and Hindi word, and it means peace of mind or serenity. And I chose Chayn as the word because when I helped one of my friends get out of the abusive marriage, she was staying with me. And the first night she stayed with me, we had spent the day kind of moving her stuff out of her abusive husband's house, and while he was away at work. And we did all that stuff. And I remember making her a cup of tea, and we were sitting down, and I asked her, how do you feel? And she said, now I have Chayn. So when I started Chayn a year later, it just that one line stuck in my head, and I thought, okay, I'll call this Chayn.
And you're 100% run by volunteers, is that right?
Almost 100%. So I was a volunteer for 7 years, but I went full time in July. So, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I managed to gather enough support to be able to go full time.
Wow, that's, incredible. How have you been affected by COVID-19?
Our views have gone up by 3 times, but apart from that, we really haven't had any major changes because Chayn is a digital first organization. We've always worked online. Our volunteers, we have 400 volunteers from all across the world, about 20 countries. So, nothing truly has changed for us in what we do. The big difference is for everybody else. It seems like a lot more people want to work with us and understand the value of our work, want to learn from what we've been doing. And we've been able to capitalize on this interest to, get people to embrace digital more because it's so critical.
And you've had 1 million hits to your page. In fact, that number's probably gone up since I read that fact.
Yes, I think we have gone over 1 million page views. I think we're about 1.2 million now.
That's incredible. Now, you aim to reach and empower women and give them the right information to take control of their lives. How do you find that works from country to country? Each country must have different rights. You're in over 20 different countries, so that must be an incredible amount of work.
It is, but it's made easier by the fact that we have an incredibly diverse team. And that team is able to, use their like knowledge of their communities and put that across. And the way we work is we try not to put any specific information to do that might change very suddenly or often, like particular laws. We don't put that together for all countries. Instead, we direct people to government websites for them or to local organizations. It's everything else around it that needs addressing, and that's the kind of gap we fill.
And it's so easy to use. I've been on the website. It's very accessible. With a couple of clicks, you can find the information that you want. There's opportunity to chat to people if you're struggling yourself. Is that your speciality, the tech side of things? Is tech something that you've always been passionate about?
I've always been passionate about technology as an early adopter, but I never studied it. It was something I did, while being at university, and then just learned by myself through going to events and like conferences and courses. And now we're fortunate that we can do a lot more complex things because we have the resources to hire good developers. But also while I was a volunteer for Chayn and doing Chayn voluntarily, I had a full-time day job, which was in tech. So I've been working in tech since I was at uni, since 2012. So I'm definitely very much part of the tech sector.
What you've set up is remarkable. And you've been acknowledged recently for your work on the honours list.
Yes, that was very unexpected and very grateful, but also kind of strange because, the medals that you get, it says BEM, which is British Empire Medal. And as a product of the empire, as a Pakistani, that word feels strange and kind of painful. It would be nice if it was rebranded to British Excellence Medal or British something else with the E.
I think that's a very fair and valid point. Did you choose to accept in the end?
I had only a few days to make up my mind, and I decided to accept for my grandparents, who would have been very proud, and the fact that someone went through a lot of trouble to nominate me. And the award comes to me, but I stand in front of a huge team of volunteers and community. So I decided to accept it for that.
Well, I think you should be extremely proud, regardless of the wording of what your achievement demonstrates. What are your plans for the future?
So many more plans. There's a world of opportunities for Chayn. And for me, I think we have done excellent services in the last 2 years. And I'm really keen on Chayn to expand the services because it's one of those areas where not a lot of charities have the experience or the capacity to provide something online. And Chayn has a hybrid model where a lot of our work is done with volunteers, but we also have contractors and staff members increasingly now. So we've been working on mental health and mental well-being, and I'd love to work further on tech safety to make sure people can sort of embrace the world, of the internet and digital devices without putting themselves at risk.
Thank you so much for talking to us today, Hera. Thank you for talking about your culture and the work that you do. It's been an absolute privilege to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to Hera for a great interview. Remember, you can pre-order a first edition copy of Secret Dishes from Around the World too from the shop on Bounceback Food's website. Go to www.bouncebackfood.co.uk/shop to place your order. To find out more about the people featured on today's podcast, head to the blog on Bounceback Food's website, where you'll find the episode notes. Well, that's all for now. Thanks for listening to Share Your Secrets, a podcast by Bounceback Food CIC. I'm your host, Miriam Rendell, and I'll see you next week. This episode was sponsored by Sophia Carey, a freelance photographer and designer from London who's currently based in Manchester. Sophia has worked with a range of clients across genres including travel, events, e-commerce, live music, weddings, fashion and food. For more information, check out Sophia's Instagram @SophiaJCarey or visit her website www.sophiacarey.co.uk.